Eleanor Whitmore never imagined her wedding dress would be meant for another woman. Standing in that cramped Kansas farmhouse, hands trembling as she read her sister's farewell letter, she faced an impossible choice: let her family drown in debt, or board a stagecoach west to marry a stranger who'd paid for a bride he'd never met. The ticket was non-refundable. The rancher was waiting, and her beautiful sister had run off with someone else's future. What happened next would either destroy her completely or prove she was stronger than anyone ever believed. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Eleanor's story travels. And please, hit that like button and stick around until the end. You won't believe where this goes. The letter shook in Eleanor's hands, and she read it 3 times before the words actually made sense. Dearest Eleanor, by the time you read this, I'll be married to Thomas Whitfield. I know what you're thinking, but please understand, I couldn't go through with marrying a man I've never met. A rancher in the middle of nowhere? Living in some shack miles from civilization, that's not the life I want. Thomas loves me. He has a proper house in town, a thriving business, a future that doesn't involve freezing winters and dust storms. I'm sorry about Mr. Mercer. I'm sorry about the money he sent for the journey, but surely he'll understand when you explain. Or perhaps he'll just find another bride. Men like him always do. Please don't hate me. Your sister, Rosalie. Eleanor let the paper fall to the kitchen table. Through the window, she could see her father splitting wood behind the barn, his shoulders bent under weight that had nothing to do with the axe. Her mother sat in the front room, mending the same dress she'd been working on for 3 days, her hands moving without purpose. They didn't know yet. Rosalie had been corresponding with Cole Mercer for 8 months, letters back and forth, getting to know each other the way people did when an entire country stretched between them. He was a rancher outside Cheyenne, 32 years old, never married, owned 200 acres and ran cattle, needed a wife. Rosalie had seemed excited at first. She'd read his letters aloud at dinner, describing the ranch, the mountains, the life they'd build together. Their mother had cried happy tears. Their father had finally stopped looking so defeated. And then Thomas Whitfield had arrived in town. Eleanor picked up the letter again, studying her sister's careful handwriting. The paper still smelled like Rosalie's perfume, roses and vanilla, expensive stuff Thomas probably bought her. The stagecoach ticket sat beside the letter, paid in full. Non-transferable, the ticket office would say, but they'd honor it if someone showed up with the right name. Cole Mercer had sent $40 for the journey. $40 their father had already spent on seed, tools, paying down debts that had been crushing them for 2 years. $40 they couldn't pay back. Eleanor was 26, 4 years older than Rosalie, and those years showed in ways that had nothing to do with age. Her hands were rough from work. Her face had sun lines around the eyes. Her hair was brown where Rosalie's was golden. Her figure sturdy where her sister's was delicate. Growing up, people had always commented on Rosalie's beauty. Such a pretty girl, they'd say, right in front of Eleanor. She'll have no trouble finding a husband. No one ever said that about Eleanor. She'd stopped expecting them to. The kitchen door opened and her mother came in, still carrying the mending. Eleanor, have you seen your sister? She was supposed to help me with... She stopped, seeing Eleanor's face. What's wrong? Eleanor handed her the letter. She watched her mother's expression change as she read. Confusion first, then shock, then something that looked like despair folding in on itself. Oh no, her mother whispered. Oh, Rosalie, what have you done? She married Thomas Whitfield. When? This morning, I think. She must have left before dawn. Her mother sank into a chair, the letter falling from her hands. Your father used that money. We needed it so badly, and Mr. Mercer seemed so reliable. A good man. We thought... She pressed her hands to her face. We can't pay him back. We don't have $40. We don't have 40 cents. Eleanor stared at the ticket. An idea was forming. A terrible, impossible idea that made her stomach turn even as her mind started working through the logistics. Someone has to go, she said quietly. Her mother looked up. What? Someone has to get on that stagecoach and go to Wyoming. Otherwise, we're stealing from him. Otherwise, he paid for a bride and got nothing. Eleanor, we can't send you instead. That's not how this works. He chose Rosalie. He wrote to Rosalie. He wrote to a woman he's never met. Someone who presented herself a certain way in letters. I can tell him the truth when I arrive. I won't lie. I won't pretend to be her. but I'll give him the choice. The choice to what? Marry you instead? Her mother's voice cracked. Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but what? Eleanor stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. But I'm not pretty enough. But no man would choose me if he had another option. I know that, Mama. I've known that my whole life. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Eleanor grabbed the ticket, her hands steadier now. I'm going. I'll tell him everything. If he sends me away, I'll find work in Cheyenne. I'll send money back when I can. But I won't let Papa go to jail for debt, and I won't let this family lose everything because Rosalie decided she wanted something prettier. Her mother started to cry. Eleanor walked out before she could change her mind. Man. The stagecoach left at dawn 2 days later. Eleanor sat in the back with her one bag, wearing her best dress, which wasn't saying much. A dark blue cotton thing she'd made herself 3 years ago. Practical. Durable. Nothing like the traveling outfit Rosalie would have worn. There were 4 other passengers, a salesman with a mustache that drooped past his chin, an older woman in mourning black who didn't speak to anyone, 2 men who looked like miners, rough and tired, heading west to try their luck. The salesman tried making conversation for the first hour. Eleanor answered politely but didn't encourage him. After a while, he gave up and dozed off, his head bouncing against the window frame every time they hit a rut. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions. Flat grassland, occasionally broken by a creek or a stand of cottonwood trees. The sky was enormous, bigger than Eleanor had ever imagined sky could be. It made her feel small, insignificant, perfect for disappearing. She tried not to think about what she was doing, tried not to imagine Cole Mercer's face when she stepped off the coach and he realized she wasn't the woman he'd been expecting. Would he be angry, disappointed? Would he send her away immediately, or would he at least listen to her explanation? The letters Rosalie had received were in Eleanor's bag. She'd read them all before leaving, trying to understand the man she was traveling toward. Cole Mercer wrote like someone unused to putting feelings on paper. His sentences were short, factual. He described the ranch, the work, the weather. He'd mentioned loneliness once, in a letter from March. The winters here are hard. Not just the cold, but the silence. A man can go weeks without seeing another soul. Rosalie had written back about parties and church socials, about her love of music and dancing. She'd described herself as delicate, in need of protection and guidance. Eleanor was none of those things. The stagecoach stopped that night at a way station, a rough building with a stable and a few rooms for travelers. Eleanor shared a bed with the woman in black, who snored loudly and took most of the blanket. She barely slept. The second day was worse than the first. The road got rougher as they climbed into hill country. Eleanor's back ached from the constant jolting. The salesman got sick and had to stop 3 times to vomit by the roadside. The miners argued about politics until everyone else wanted to throw them out of the moving coach. On the 3rd day, they saw their first mountains. Eleanor pressed her face to the window, staring at the distant peaks. They looked unreal, too big, too sharp against the sky, like something from a painting that didn't quite belong in the actual world. First time seeing the Rockies? One of the miners asked. His name was Jack, she thought, or John. She couldn't remember. Yes. They get bigger. He was right. By the 4th day, the mountains dominated everything. The road wound between foothills, climbing steadily. The air got thinner, colder. Eleanor wrapped herself in her shawl and tried not to think about winters here, about what Cole had written. The snow can reach the windowsills. You won't leave the house for days at a time. What was she doing? On the 5th morning, the driver called back that they'd reach Cheyenne by afternoon. Eleanor's stomach dropped. She'd spent 5 days mentally preparing for this moment, and she still had no idea what she was going to say. Hello, I'm not the woman you were expecting, but I'm here anyway, and I hope that's acceptable. It sounded insane. The woman in black noticed her expression. First time west? She asked. It was the first thing she'd said the entire journey. Yes. Running from something or toward something? Eleanor considered that. Both, I think. The woman nodded. That's usually how it goes. Cheyenne appeared on the horizon around 2 in the afternoon. It was bigger than Eleanor expected. A real town, with actual streets and buildings, not just a collection of shacks. The stagecoach rattled down the main street, past a general store, a church. People moved along the sidewalks. Cowboys, businessmen, women in nice dresses. This was civilization, just a rough version of it, pushed up against the edge of wilderness. The coach stopped in front of the stage office. The driver climbed down and started unloading bags. Eleanor didn't move. "End of the line, miss," the driver called. She forced herself to stand, to gather her bag, to step down onto the dusty street. The air smelled like horses and wood smoke. Wind swept down from the mountains, colder than anything back in Kansas. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter and looked around. A man stood near the stage office, watching the passengers disembark. She knew immediately it was him. Cole Mercer was tall, over 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, built like someone who worked hard every day of his life. He wore canvas pants, a worn shirt, a leather vest. His hat was pushed back, showing dark hair and a face that was weathered, angular, hard to read. He was looking for Rosalie. Eleanor watched him scan each passenger as they climbed down. The salesman, the miners, the woman in black. His eyes passed over Eleanor without recognition, then returned to the coach door, waiting. She made herself walk toward him. His eyes came back to her as she approached. Confused now. She saw him note her plain dress, her rough hands, her sun-weathered face. "Mr. Mercer?" she said. He stared at her. "Yes?" "I'm Eleanor Whitmore." She said it clearly, watching his face change as he processed the wrong first name. "Rosalie's older sister. I need to explain something, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me finish before you say anything." Cole's jaw tightened. His eyes went back to the stagecoach, as if Rosalie might still emerge. When she didn't, his gaze returned to Eleanor. "Where is she?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Married to someone else. She met a man in town 3 days before she was supposed to leave. She chose him instead." Eleanor kept her voice steady, even though her heart was hammering. "She left a letter. She's sorry, but she's not coming." The muscles in Cole's jaw worked. He looked away, staring at nothing in particular down the street. "I'm not here to trick you," Eleanor continued. "I'm not pretending to be her. I came because you paid for the journey, and my family already spent that money on things we needed to survive. We can't pay you back. So I thought I'd give you the choice." "Choice of what? Whether to send me away or give me a chance to prove I'm not a complete waste of your $40. She met his eyes. "I know I'm not what you expected. I know I'm not who you wanted. But I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, manage a household. I won't complain about the isolation or the weather. I just need a place to be, and you need, well, whatever it was you needed when you decided to send for a mail-order bride in the first place." Cole studied her for a long moment. His face gave away nothing. "I was expecting someone else," he said finally. "I know. Someone younger, prettier, probably." Eleanor felt the words like a slap, even though she'd thought the same things herself. "I know that too." "And you came anyway." "I came because I didn't have another choice. But I'm here honestly. I won't lie to you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. If that's not enough, I understand. Just point me toward where I can find work, and I'll manage." The wind picked up, blowing dust down the street. Somewhere a horse whinnied. A wagon rattled past. Cole took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, put the hat back on. He looked tired, older than his letters suggested, like a man who'd been dealt too many bad hands and had stopped expecting anything else. "I live 40 miles from here," he said. "Ranch outside a town called Clearwater, though that's generous. It's barely 6 buildings. Once you're out there, you're out there. No easy way back. No neighbors close enough to matter. It's just me and my ranch hand, Luke. He's young, harmless, but it's still a hard life, harder than you probably imagine. I'm not afraid of hard work. Hard work is different than hard living." He shifted his weight, considering. "I'll make you a deal. Come out to the ranch for a month. No promises, no commitments. You can see what the life actually is, and I can see if you're—" He trailed off. "If I'm suitable?" Eleanor finished. "If we're suitable for each other," he corrected. "End of the month, if either of us wants out, I'll bring you back to Cheyenne and help you find respectable work. If we both agree to make it permanent, we'll get married proper. That seem fair?" It was more than fair, more than she'd expected. "Yes," Eleanor said. "That seems fair." Cole nodded once, decisively. I've got a wagon around the corner. We'll leave now. Get to the ranch before dark. He picked up her bag without asking, already walking. You eaten? Not since breakfast. There's a place that makes decent stew. We'll stop. Eleanor followed him down the street, her legs still shaky from 5 days in a stagecoach. This was happening. She was actually doing this. The restaurant was small, crowded, loud. Cole ordered for both of them, beef stew, bread, coffee. They sat across from each other at a rough table, and Eleanor tried not to stare at him. Up close, he was even harder to read. His face had seen weather and work and probably some violence. There was a scar through his left eyebrow. His hands were calloused, scarred in places. He ate methodically, not looking at her. The letters Rosalie wrote, Eleanor said carefully. Were they... Did she describe herself a certain way? Cole glanced up. She said she was delicate, needed protecting, liked pretty things and social gatherings. His mouth twisted slightly. I figured that was just how women wrote in letters. Didn't think much of it. I'm not delicate. I can see that. And I don't need protecting. Noted? He went back to his stew. Why did you decide to send for a wife? Eleanor asked. If you don't mind me asking. Cole was quiet for a moment. Ranch is lonely, works hard, gets harder every year, and I'm not getting younger. Thought it might be easier with a partner, someone to share the load. That's practical. Practical's about all I can manage. He finished his coffee. What about you? Why'd you really come here instead of just sending a letter explaining the situation? Eleanor picked at her bread. Because if I stayed in Kansas, I'd spend the rest of my life being the spinster sister who couldn't find a husband. I'd work on my father's farm until he died, then on my brother-in-law's farm after that. I'd grow old taking care of other people's children, sleeping in other people's houses, always grateful for whatever scraps of life they threw my way. She looked up. This seemed like less of a sure thing, but more of a chance. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Not quite respect, but maybe understanding. Fair enough, he said. They finished eating in silence. Cole paid, then led her to a wagon parked behind a general store. It was loaded with supplies, flour, sugar, tools, lumber. He helped her up onto the bench, then climbed up beside her. The wagon lurched forward. Cheyenne fell away behind them. The road, barely a road really, more like a track worn into the prairie, stretched northwest. Mountains rose on their left, massive and indifferent. The sun was starting to sink, painting everything orange and gold. Eleanor had never felt so far from home in her life. Tell me about the ranch, she said, needing to hear something other than wagon wheels and wind. 200 acres, run about 80 head of cattle right now. Used to be more, but I had some losses last winter. House is decent. 2 bedrooms, kitchen, front room, barn, stable, chicken coop. Creek runs through the property when there's enough water. When there's enough water? Droughts happen. Creek dries up sometimes in late summer. He glanced at her. You know anything about cattle? Not much. You'll learn. Can you shoot? A rifle? No. I'll teach you. Bears and mountain lions don't care if you're delicate or not. Eleanor suppressed a shiver. What about Luke? Your ranch hand? Good kid. 20 years old. Works hard, doesn't talk much. Lost his parents 2 years back, needed a place to be. I gave him one. Cole's voice softened slightly when he talked about Luke, almost protective. He'll be surprised to see you. Because I'm not Rosalie? Because I didn't tell him you were coming at all. The sun sank lower. The temperature dropped. Eleanor wrapped her shawl tighter and watched the landscape change. The prairie gave way to rolling hills, then rougher country, scattered with pine and scrub brush. She could smell the mountains now, cold air, pine sap, something wild and clean. Full dark had fallen by the time Cole turned the wagon off the main track onto an even rougher path. Eleanor could barely see anything except stars, more stars than she'd ever imagined existed, scattered across the sky like someone had flung handfuls of diamonds into the darkness. Almost there, Cole said. 10 minutes later, lights appeared ahead. 2 buildings, windows glowing yellow. The wagon rolled into a yard and a dog started barking. The door to the larger building opened and a young man appeared holding a lantern. Cole, he called. That you? Yeah. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop. Got a surprise, Luke. Eleanor climbed down stiffly, her legs protesting after hours on the bench. Luke approached with the lantern, and she could sandy-haired, with an open, honest face that registered complete confusion when he saw her. "This is Eleanor Whitmore," Cole said, already unloading supplies. "She's going to be staying with us for a while. Eleanor, this is Luke Bennett." Luke stared at her. "I thought, didn't you say—" "Plans changed," Cole said flatly. "Help me get this unloaded, then show Eleanor to the spare room." Eleanor stood in the yard, feeling utterly lost. The house loomed before her, dark wood, solid, bigger than her family's farmhouse, but somehow lonelier. She could hear cattle lowing somewhere in the darkness. The dog, a border collie mix, sniffed her skirt cautiously. This was her life now, at least for the next month. Luke and Cole worked in efficient silence, carrying supplies into the house. Eleanor tried to help, but Cole waved her off. "You've been traveling for days. Go inside, warm up." She climbed the porch steps and pushed open the door. The inside of the house was exactly what she'd feared. A front room with basic furniture, chairs, a table, a cold fireplace. Through a doorway, she could see the kitchen. Everything was functional. Nothing was comfortable. Dust covered most surfaces. The place looked like men lived there, men who didn't care about anything except basic survival. "Sorry about the mess," Luke said, appearing behind her with her bag. "We weren't expecting company." "It's fine," Eleanor said, though it really wasn't. He led her down a short hallway to a small bedroom. A bed, a dresser, a window with no curtains. That was it. "I'll get you some blankets," Luke said. "Gets cold at night, even in summer, and there's water in the kitchen if you want to wash up. Outhouse is out back, 40 feet from the door. Watch for snakes." "Snakes?" "And spiders. Don't usually come inside, but sometimes they do." "Right." Luke hovered in the doorway, clearly wanting to ask questions but not sure how. Finally, he just said, "I'm glad you're here, Miss Whitmore. Cole doesn't say much, but I know he's been lonely. We both have, I guess." Before Eleanor could respond, he disappeared down the hall. She sat on the bed, which creaked under her weight. Through the thin walls, she could hear Cole and Luke talking in the kitchen, their voices too low to make out words. She'd done it. She'd actually gone through with this insane plan. Now she just had to survive it. Eleanor woke before dawn, disoriented and stiff. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came back, the journey, the ranch, Cole's weathered face and cautious agreement. 1 month to prove herself. She dressed quickly in the cold room and made her way to the kitchen. The house was silent. Through the window, she could see the first gray light touching the mountains. The kitchen was worse than she'd thought. Dirty dishes piled in a basin. The stove was crusted with grease. Supplies sat haphazardly on shelves, and the floor looked like it hadn't been swept in weeks. Eleanor rolled up her sleeves. By the time Cole and Luke emerged from wherever they'd been sleeping, she had a fire going in the stove and was making breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, coffee. Cole stopped in the doorway, staring. "Morning," Eleanor said without turning around. "Food will be ready in 10 minutes." She heard him move into the room, heard Luke following. Neither of them said anything. They just sat down at the table and watched her work. When she set the plates down, Luke actually looked like he might cry. "I haven't had biscuits in 2 years," he said quietly. Cole ate methodically, not commenting, but she saw him glance at her twice, something unreadable in his expression. After breakfast, Cole stood. "Luke and I have work. Fence line needs mending on the south pasture. We'll be gone most of the day." "What should I do?" Eleanor asked. Cole looked around the kitchen. "Whatever you think needs doing." They left. Eleanor surveyed the house in full daylight. It was even worse than she'd thought, but she'd made a promise to prove herself, to earn her place. She got to work. By the time Cole and Luke returned that evening, the house had been transformed. Floors swept and scrubbed, windows cleaned, dishes washed and put away. Fresh curtains she'd made from spare fabric hung in the kitchen. The whole place smelled like soap and bread and dinner cooking on the stove. Luke stood in the doorway with his mouth open. Cole said nothing, just hung up his hat, washed his hands, sat down at the table. But Eleanor saw something in his eyes as he looked around. Maybe not trust yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and it sure as hell wasn't easy. That first week, Eleanor scrubbed and cleaned and repaired until her hands cracked and bled. The house fought back like it had gotten comfortable being neglected. Grease didn't want to leave the stove. Dust had settled into the floorboards like it belonged there. The curtains she tried to hang kept falling because the rods were rusted through. But Eleanor was stubborn in ways her sister had never been. She woke before the men every morning, got the fire going, made coffee strong enough to strip paint. By the time Cole and Luke stumbled into the kitchen, there was always food waiting. Real food, not the half-burned beans and jerky they'd been surviving on. Cole never thanked her. Didn't comment on the clean floors or the mended shirts that appeared on his bed, or the fact that he could actually see through the windows now. He just ate what she put in front of him, nodded once, and left for the day's work. Luke at least had manners. "You don't have to do all this," he said on the third morning, watching her knead bread dough. "We were managing fine before." "You were surviving," Eleanor corrected. "That's different than managing. Still, it's a lot of work." "So is mending fence in the heat all day, but you do it." Luke grinned at that. He had an easy smile, the kind that made him look even younger than 20. Fair point. She'd learned quickly that Luke was the talker. He filled the silence that Cole created, chattering about the cattle, the weather, the mountain lion he'd seen last week up by the North Ridge. He asked Eleanor questions about Kansas, about her family, about what had possessed her to travel across half the country to marry a stranger. She gave him the short version, the one that didn't include all the years of being second best, of watching Rosalie get everything while she got the leftovers. Cole, meanwhile, watched her. Not obviously, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but she felt his eyes on her when she thought she wasn't paying attention. Studying her, trying to figure out if she was going to break. She had no intention of breaking. On the fifth day, Eleanor decided to tackle the real disaster, the chicken coop. It was a leaning structure behind the barn, half the boards rotted through, the door hanging on one hinge. Inside, 3 scrawny chickens pecked at nothing because no one had fed them properly in what looked like months. "You've got chickens," Eleanor said that evening at dinner, "that aren't producing eggs because they're starving." Cole looked up from his plate. "They get fed." "When? Once a week, whether they need it or not." Luke snorted into his coffee. Cole's jaw tightened. "I've been busy." "So I noticed. Well, I fixed the coop. They'll start laying again in a few days if they don't die first." She stood to clear the plates. "You might want to check on them occasionally. Just a thought." She turned away before she could see his reaction, but she heard Luke's quiet laugh. "She's got you there, boss. Shut up and finish your dinner." But the next morning, when Eleanor went to feed the chickens, she found fresh straw in the coop and the water trough filled. Cole was already gone, out checking the herd with Luke, but she knew it had been him. Something small shifted in her chest. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. The days developed a rhythm. Eleanor worked the house and the immediate yard, garden, chickens, cooking, cleaning, endless laundry. Cole and Luke worked the ranch, cattle, fences, water management, the 100 small emergencies that came with keeping animals alive in harsh country. They didn't talk much at meals. Cole wasn't built for conversation, and Eleanor had never been good at small talk, but the silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was just there, shared space between people who were trying to figure each other out. 2 weeks in, the weather changed. Eleanor woke to the sound of rain hammering the roof. Real rain, the kind that came down in sheets and turned the yard into mud within minutes. She dressed and went to the kitchen, expecting Cole and Luke to delay their work. They were already gone. She found them an hour later, drenched and cursing, trying to move cattle to higher ground. The creek that ran through the property had swollen overnight, threatening to flood the lower pasture where most of the herd was grazing. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching them work in the downpour. Luke's horse slipped in the mud and nearly went down. Cole was shouting something she couldn't hear over the rain. She went back inside, put on her oldest dress, wrapped her shawl tight, and walked out into the storm. "What the hell are you doing?" Cole yelled when he saw her approaching. "Helping! Get back inside! You need another person." She grabbed a stick and started moving toward the cattle, waving her arms. "Tell me what to do." For a second, Cole just stared at her. Rain streamed down his face. Then something changed in his expression. Calculation, maybe? Or just acceptance that she wasn't going to listen anyway. "Keep them moving east," he shouted. "Away from the creek. Don't get between them and the water." Eleanor had never worked cattle in her life, didn't know the first thing about it, but she understood panic, and she understood that if those animals drowned, Cole's livelihood drowned with them. She waded into the mud and the rain and the chaos. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of shouting and pushing and waving and praying the cows moved in the right direction. Eleanor's dress was ruined, plastered to her skin. Her hair hung in ropes down her back. She couldn't feel her feet, but they got the herd to higher ground. Luke leaned against his horse, breathing hard. That was close. Cole dismounted, looking at the swollen creek. The water was brown, churning, carrying branches and debris downstream. If they'd been an hour slower, they would have lost animals. He turned to Eleanor. She was shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off, cold down to her bones, mud up to her knees. You shouldn't have come out here, Cole said. You needed help. You could have gotten hurt. So could you. She met his eyes. I'm not delicate, remember? I told you that. Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. No, he said quietly. You're definitely not delicate. That night, after she'd changed into dry clothes and made dinner that no one had much appetite for, Eleanor sat by the fire trying to get warm. Her hands were cramping from the cold. Her shoulders ached. Luke had already gone to bed in the small room off the barn where he slept. It was just her and Cole in the front room, the fire crackling between them. You did good today, Cole said. Eleanor looked up, surprised. It was the first real compliment he'd given her. Thank you. But don't do it again. Do what? Help? Put yourself at risk like that. He was staring into the fire, his face half in shadow. This life is dangerous enough without taking stupid chances. You take stupid chances every day. That's different. How? It's my ranch, my responsibility. Eleanor felt something hot rise in her chest. Anger, maybe. Or frustration. And what am I then? Just a guest? Someone you're tolerating until the month is up? Cole's jaw worked. He didn't answer. I came here to prove I belong, Eleanor said. To prove I'm worth keeping around. I can't do that by staying safe inside while you risk your neck. You can do it by being here. By keeping the house running, that's enough. For you, maybe. Not for me. They stared at each other across the fire. The tension stretched thin, brittle. Finally, Cole stood. I'm going to check the barn. Make sure everything's secure. He left without another word. Eleanor sat alone, watching the fire burn down to coals, and wondered if she'd just ruined whatever fragile understanding they'd been building. But the next morning, Cole knocked on her door before dawn. Get up, he called through the wood. If you're going to insist on helping with the cattle, you need to learn how to do it properly. That's how Eleanor learned to ride. Cole put her on the gentlest horse they had, an old mare named Bess who moved like she was underwater. He taught her how to sit, how to hold the reins, how to guide the horse with her knees. Don't yank, he said, adjusting her grip. She's not a plow. Gentle pressure, she'll respond. Eleanor tried. The horse wandered in a circle. Gentle doesn't mean non-existent, Cole said. You're asking her, not suggesting she might consider possibly thinking about it. Luke, watching from the fence, laughed. It took a week before Eleanor could stay on the horse for more than 20 minutes without her legs screaming. Another week before she could actually help move cattle without Cole having to constantly redirect her. But slowly, painfully, she learned. She learned which cows were troublemakers and which ones led the herd. She learned to spot lameness, sickness, the subtle signs that something was wrong. She learned the land, where the ground was solid, where it got boggy, which parts of the creek were shallow enough to cross. She learned that Cole noticed everything. The way a cow held her head, the shift in wind direction, the color of the sky at dawn that meant weather was coming. And she learned that despite his gruff exterior and his complete inability to say anything encouraging, Cole was a good teacher, patient in his own frustrated way. He didn't praise, but he stopped correcting her as often. That was as close to approval as he seemed capable of giving. One afternoon, 3 weeks into her stay, Eleanor was helping Luke move supplies from the barn when she heard a noise from the direction of the creek. A bawling sound. Distressed. You hear that? She asked. Luke tilted his head. Sounds like a calf. They found Cole already there, knee-deep in the creek, trying to pull a calf out of a tangle of downed branches. The animal was stuck, thrashing, making the situation worse. The mother cow paced on the bank, bellowing. Rope! Cole shouted when he saw them. Luke, get me a rope! But Luke was already running back toward the barn. Eleanor waded in without thinking. The water was cold, moving fast from recent rain. The current pulled at her skirt. She grabbed one side of the calf while Cole worked the other, trying to maneuver it free without breaking its legs. "Careful," Cole grunted. "Don't let the current take you." The calf kicked, catching Eleanor in the ribs. She lost her footing, went down hard, swallowed water. The creek swept her downstream 10 feet before she got her feet under her again, coughing. Cole left the calf and grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the bank. "I'm fine," she gasped. "You're an idiot." "So are you. The calf? The calf can wait until we have proper equipment." But the calf couldn't wait. While they argued, it panicked harder, wedging itself deeper into the branches. Cole swore, a string of words Eleanor had never heard him use, and waded back in. Luke came running with the rope. Between the three of them, they got the calf free. It stumbled onto the bank and immediately went to its mother, shaking and exhausted but alive. Eleanor sat on the ground, dripping, her side throbbing where the calf had kicked her. Cole knelt beside her. "Let me see." "I'm fine." "Eleanor," his voice was sharp, "let me see." She pulled up her shirt enough to show the bruise already forming, dark purple, spreading across her ribs. Cole's face went hard. "Can you breathe?" "Yes." "Deeply?" She tried. It hurt, but nothing felt broken. "Yes." "You're lucky." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's get you back to the house." Luke stayed to watch the calf. Cole walked Eleanor back, one hand on her elbow like he thought she might collapse. She wanted to shake him off, to prove she was fine, but honestly she was starting to feel shaky. Inside, he made her sit by the fire while he brought her dry clothes and hot coffee. "Take those wet things off," he said, turning his back. "You'll catch pneumonia." Eleanor changed awkwardly, her ribs protesting every movement. When she was decent, Cole turned around and studied her with an expression she couldn't read. "You keep doing this," he said. "Doing what?" "Throwing yourself into danger without thinking." I was thinking that calf needed help. It's a calf, an animal, not worth risking your life over." Eleanor set down her coffee with enough force to slosh it. "Everything on this ranch is worth risking something over. That's what you do every single day. Why is it different when I do it?" "Because you're—" Cole stopped himself. "I'm what? A woman? Delicate? Someone who needs protecting?" She stood up, ignoring the pain. "I told you on day one, I'm not that person. If you want someone who's going to stay inside and look pretty and never get dirty, you should have sent me back to Cheyenne the minute I arrived." "That's not what I—" "Then what? What do you want from me?" Cole stared at her. The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look older, more weathered, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "I don't know," he said finally. Honest, raw. "I thought I wanted a wife to make the house less empty, someone to cook and clean and be there. That's what I told myself, but now you're here, and you're nothing like what I expected, and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with you." Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest. "I'm not asking you to do anything with me. I'm asking you to let me be useful, to let me be part of this place instead of just furniture that happens to talk back." "You're not furniture." "Then stop treating me like I might break." They stood there, 3 feet apart, the air between them charged with something Eleanor didn't have a name for. "Fine," Cole said. "You want to be part of the ranch? Really part of it? Tomorrow you're learning to shoot." He left before she could respond. The next morning, true to his word, Cole brought out a rifle after breakfast. An older model, worn but well-maintained. "This was my mother's," he said, handing it to Eleanor. "Lighter than mine. Easier to manage." Eleanor took it carefully. She'd never held a gun before. It was heavier than she expected. "First rule," Cole said, "never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. Second rule, assume it's always loaded. Third rule, know what's behind your target." He spent an hour teaching her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze instead of pulling the trigger. "Try it," he said, pointing to a row of cans he'd set up on the fence 50 feet away. Eleanor raised the rifle, felt the weight of it, tried to remember everything he'd told her. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil knocked her back a step. The shot went wide, kicking up dust, 6 feet left of the target. "Again," Cole said. She tried 5 more times, missed every shot. Luke, watching from the porch, looked sympathetic. It takes practice, Miss Eleanor. I didn't hit anything for weeks when I started. Again, Cole repeated. Eleanor's shoulder was starting to hurt from the recoil. Her ears rang, but she raised the rifle and tried again. This time the shot hit the fence post, not the can, but close enough to make her feel like maybe she wasn't completely hopeless. Better, Cole said. It might have been the highest praise she'd ever heard from him. They practiced every morning after that. Eleanor's shoulder turned black and blue from the recoil, but her aim slowly improved. By the end of the week, she could hit the cans more often than she missed. Why do I need to learn this? She asked one morning, lowering the rifle. Because there are things out here that'll kill you if you can't defend yourself, Cole said. Bears, mountain lions, sometimes men who think a woman alone is easy prey. He took the rifle from her, checking it automatically. I won't always be close enough to help. The weight of that statement settled between them. Eleanor had stopped thinking about the month deadline, stopped counting days. She'd been at the ranch almost 4 weeks, and Cole hadn't mentioned bringing her back to Cheyenne, hadn't brought up the arrangement they'd made. Maybe he'd forgotten, or maybe he was waiting for her to say something. That night, after Luke had gone to bed and Eleanor was cleaning up from dinner, Cole sat at the table longer than usual, just sitting, watching her work. Something on your mind? Eleanor asked, drying the last plate. The month's almost up. There it was. Eleanor's hands stilled. Yes. You have thoughts about that? She turned to face him. Do you? Cole's fingers drummed on the table, an anxious gesture she'd never seen from him before. You've worked harder than I expected, done more. The house looks better than it has in years. Even Luke's happier, and that kid's usually happy anyway. No but. Cole met her eyes. I'm saying you've proven yourself. If you want to stay, make it permanent. Eleanor's heart did something complicated in her chest. Is that what you want? I'm asking what you want. I asked first. A muscle in Cole's jaw twitched. I want you to stay. There. Happy? He said it like an accusation, like admitting it cost him something. Eleanor sat down across from him. Why? Why what? Why do you want me to stay? Because I'm useful? Because the house is clean? Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I sleep better knowing you're here. Because the house feels less empty. Because watching you work those cattle in the rain was the first time in years I felt like I wasn't doing this alone. He looked away. That enough reason for you? Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back hard. I'll stay. Yeah? Yeah. Cole nodded once. Good. We'll go into Clearwater tomorrow. Find a minister. Make it official. That's it? That's your proposal? What else do you want? Flowers? Poetry? But his mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. Maybe just a please. Please stay and marry me and keep making those biscuits because I'm getting used to not eating charcoal for breakfast. Eleanor laughed. Actually laughed. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's probably the only proposal you've ever heard. True? She stood, walked around the table, held out her hand. Okay, Cole Mercer, I'll marry you. He took her hand. His palm was calloused, warm, solid, real. Tomorrow then, he said. Tomorrow. But tomorrow didn't go the way they planned. Eleanor woke to shouting. She threw on clothes and ran outside to find Luke yelling from the north pasture. Something about the cattle. Something wrong. Cole was already running. Eleanor followed. What they found made her stomach drop. 20 head of cattle, dead or dying, scattered across the pasture like they'd just dropped where they stood. Some were still twitching. Others had been dead for hours. What happened? Eleanor whispered. Cole knelt beside one of the dead cows, examining it. His face had gone pale. Poison. Someone poisoned the water source. Who would... I've got neighbors who want this land, who've made offers I refused. Cole stood, his hands shaking with rage. This is a message. Luke looked sick. Boss, that's 20 head. That's... I know what it is. Cole's voice was flat, dead. That's a quarter of my herd. That's my profit for the year. That's... He stopped, turned away. Eleanor wanted to touch him, to comfort him somehow, but she didn't know if he'd accept it. What do we do? She asked quietly. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then, we round up what's left, move them to the south pasture, check every water source, and we survive this. And the men who did this? His eyes went hard. That's a problem for another day. They worked until dark, checking the surviving cattle, moving them to safer ground. Eleanor's hands were shaking by the time they finished, not from the work, from watching Cole's face throughout the day, watching him look at each dead animal like it was a personal failure. That night, he sat alone in the dark house, not eating, not talking. Eleanor sat beside him. Didn't say anything, just sat. After a while, Cole spoke. I can't afford to replace those cattle. Not this year. Maybe not next year either. We'll manage. We. He looked at her. You still want to marry me, even now, when the ranch is failing? The ranch isn't failing. It took a hit. That's different. Eleanor, no. She took his hand. I didn't come here because you were rich. I came here because I needed somewhere to belong. This is that place. You are that place. That some dead cattle doesn't change that. Cole's fingers tightened on hers. You're either very brave or very stupid. Little bit of both, probably. This time he did smile. Slight, barely there, but real. Tomorrow we still get married? Eleanor asked. Tomorrow we still get married. But first they had to bury 20 head of cattle and figure out how to keep their ranch alive with 3/4 of their herd gone, and watch their backs for whoever wanted them gone. Eleanor went to bed that night understanding something new about the life she'd chosen. It wasn't just hard work and isolation, it was danger. Real danger. The kind that could destroy everything they were trying to build. But when she thought about leaving, about going back to Kansas or finding work in Cheyenne, her mind rebelled against it. This place had gotten under her skin. This broken ranch, and this damaged man, and this hard, beautiful country that didn't forgive mistakes. She belonged here now. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. They buried the cattle in a mass grave on the far edge of the property where the ground was soft enough to dig. It took 2 full days. Cole, Luke, and Eleanor working in shifts with shovels, the sun beating down merciless, the smell of death thick in the air. Eleanor had never seen anything dead before. Not like this. Not animals that had been healthy one day and gone the next, their bodies already starting to bloat in the heat. She threw up twice the first morning. By afternoon, she'd stopped gagging and just worked, sweat soaking through her dress, blisters forming on her palms. Luke looked worse than she felt. His face had gone gray, and he kept having to walk away to breathe. Cole worked like a machine, methodical, silent. His shirt came off by noon, and Eleanor saw the full map of scars across his back. Old injuries, things that had healed badly. He caught her looking once, and his jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. When the last cow was buried and covered, Cole drove the shovel into the ground and left it there. A marker, a reminder. We should go to the sheriff, Luke said quietly. Report what happened. And tell him what? Cole's voice was rough from not speaking all day. That I think someone poisoned my herd, but I've got no proof? That I've got enemies, but I can't prove who did it? It's not worth anything except showing weakness, making it clear we're vulnerable. Cole picked up his shirt, but didn't put it on. We handle this ourselves. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to say there were laws, systems, people whose job it was to deal with crimes like this. But she'd learned enough about the frontier by now to know that law out here was different, slower, often useless when you needed it most. What about the wedding? She asked instead. Cole looked at her like he'd forgotten. What about it? We were supposed to go into town yesterday, make it official. We've been burying dead cattle, Eleanor. Kind of took priority. I know that. I'm asking if we're still doing it. Something shifted in his expression, softened slightly. You still want to, even after this? I told you yesterday, dead cattle doesn't change anything. Luke cleared his throat. I can handle things here if you two want to go into Clearwater. Probably do you both good to get away from this mess for a few hours. Cole studied Eleanor for a long moment. She could see him thinking, weighing options, trying to figure out if this was the right move or just another mistake in a long line of them. Fine, he said finally. We'll go tomorrow morning, but we're back by afternoon. I don't want the place left alone too long. That night, Eleanor washed as best she could with cold water and harsh soap, trying to scrub away 2 days of dirt and death. Her hands were raw, nails broken, blisters opened and bleeding. She had one decent dress left, a gray cotton thing she'd been saving, and she put it on in the dark of her room, trying to make herself look like someone worth marrying. When she came out, he'd shaved, put on a clean shirt. His hair was wet, combed back. He looked uncomfortable, like the effort of making himself presentable was somehow painful. "You look nice," Eleanor said. "You look tired." Romantic as always. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Come on, let's get this done before I change my mind." The ride to Clearwater took 90 minutes. The town was barely bigger than Cheyenne had been. A main street with maybe 8 buildings, a general store, a saloon, a building that served as both town hall and occasional church. Mountains rose behind it, still snow-capped even in summer. Cole tied up the wagon outside the general store. "Minister's name is Hutchins. He'll marry us if we can find him sober." "That's encouraging." "It's the frontier. You take what you can get." They found Hutchins in the back room of the general store, playing cards with 2 other men. He was 60 if he was a day, with a white beard stained yellow from tobacco and eyes that had seen too much of everything. "Cole Mercer," Hutchins said, looking up from his cards. "Heard you had some trouble out at your place." Word traveled fast. "Nothing I can't handle," Cole said. "I'm here because I need you to perform a marriage." Hutchins' eyebrows went up. He looked at Eleanor with open curiosity. "This the mail-order bride I heard about?" "This is Eleanor Whitmore. She's agreed to marry me despite significant evidence that it's a bad idea." Eleanor elbowed him. "He's charming, isn't he?" "I've known Cole since he was 16, Hutchins said, standing and brushing off his pants. "Charm's never been his strong suit. You sure about this, miss?" "Reasonably sure." "That'll have to do, I suppose." Hutchins grabbed a worn Bible from a shelf. "You two got witnesses." The men he'd been playing cards with stood up. One was ancient, bent with age. The other looked like a prospector, dirt under his nails, whiskey on his breath. "They'll do," Hutchins said. "Come on then. Let's make this official before anyone comes to their senses." They stood in the small back room that smelled like tobacco and old paper. Hutchins opened the Bible, but didn't really look at it. He'd done this enough times to have the words memorized. "We're gathered here to join this man and this woman in matrimony. It's a serious business marriage, not something to enter into lightly." He looked at Cole. "You understand that?" "I do." "And you?" He turned to Eleanor. "You understand you're binding yourself to this hard-headed fool for the rest of your natural life?" Eleanor glanced at Cole, who was staring straight ahead, jaw tight. "I understand." "Good enough. Do you, Cole Mercer, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death parts you?" "I do." "And do you, Eleanor Whitmore, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband, same terms, same promises?" Eleanor's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I do." "Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you can kiss her if you want, or not. Up to you." Cole looked at Eleanor like he hadn't considered this part. His ears went slightly red. Eleanor took mercy on him. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek quickly. "There. Official." Something in his eyes softened, just for a moment. Then he was reaching into his pocket for money to pay Hutchins. "No charge," the minister said. "Consider it a wedding present. You're going to need every dollar you've got after losing that herd." Cole's face went hard. "Who told you about that?" "Like I said, word travels." Hutchins' expression turned serious. "You watch yourself out there, Cole. Whoever hit you once might try again. Let them try." Outside, the sun was bright enough to hurt. Eleanor blinked against it, her hand in Cole's because he'd taken it without asking and hadn't let go yet. "That's it then," she said. "We're married. That's it. Feel any different?" "Not particularly. You?" "A little. Maybe." She squeezed his hand. "We should get back." But Cole didn't move toward the wagon. He was looking down the street at something. Eleanor followed his gaze and saw 3 women standing outside the general store, watching them. Well-dressed women. Town women. Their expressions made Eleanor's stomach tighten. "Who are they?" she asked quietly. "Wives of the men who want my land." Cole's voice had gone flat. Don't worry about them. But it was too late. The women were walking over. The leader, a blonde woman in an expensive green dress, smiled at Cole in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Cole Mercer, congratulations on your marriage. We heard you'd sent for a bride." "Mrs. Patterson." Cole's tone was carefully neutral. Mrs. Patterson turned her attention to Eleanor and the smile got sharper. "You must be the sister. How?" "Unexpected. I'd heard Cole was expecting someone else. Rosalie, wasn't it? The pretty one?" Eleanor felt the words like a slap, but before she could respond, Cole's hand tightened on hers. "This is my wife, Eleanor," he said. His voice had gone cold. "And she's exactly who I wanted." The second woman, darker, older, with hard eyes, laughed. "How sweet. Though I have to wonder, dear, what possesses a woman to marry a man whose ranch is failing? Losing a quarter of your herd in one night? That's either terrible luck or terrible management." "It was neither," Cole said. "It was deliberate." "Such accusations. Do you have proof?" "Not yet." "Then perhaps you should focus less on conspiracy theories and more on salvaging what's left of your operation. My husband's offer still stands, you know, $12,000 for the whole property. That's more than generous considering the circumstances." "I'm not selling. Not even to save yourself from bankruptcy? How noble! And how foolish!" Mrs. Patterson's gaze slid back to Eleanor. "I do hope you knew what you were getting into, dear. The Mercer Ranch has always been more trouble than it's worth. Isolated, dangerous. No place for a woman, really, especially not one who's already been rejected once." The third woman, younger, prettier than the other two, giggled. "Can you imagine? Coming all this way for a man who wanted someone else. How humiliating." Eleanor felt heat rising in her face. Shame and anger tangled together in her chest. These women knew exactly where to cut. They'd probably been practicing. But before she could find words, Cole stepped between her and them. "That's enough," he said quietly, dangerously. "You've said your piece. Now leave my wife alone." "Oh, we didn't mean any offense," Mrs. Patterson said, all false sweetness. "Just making conversation. Welcome to the territory, Eleanor. I'm sure we'll see you around town, if you last that long." They walked away, laughter trailing behind them. Eleanor stood frozen, all the old feelings rushing back, the ones she'd thought she'd left in Kansas. Being second best, being the one nobody wanted, being the embarrassment. "Eleanor," Cole's voice cut through the spiral. "Look at me." She did. His face was tight with anger, but not at her. Everything they just said was meant to hurt you, to make you feel small. Don't give them that power. They're right, though. You did want Rosalie. You did get stuck with me instead. I didn't get stuck with anything. His hands came up to her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You think I don't know what I've got? You think I'm too stupid to see the difference between a woman who runs away at the first sign of hardship and one who buries dead cattle in the heat without complaining?" "Cole, I'm not finished. Those women, they don't work. They don't build anything. They sit in their nice houses in town and judge everyone who actually sweats for a living. You're worth 10 of them, 20. And if you can't see that yet, then I haven't been doing my job right." Eleanor's throat felt tight. "What job is that? Making sure you know you're not second best. You're not a replacement. You're—" He stopped, frustrated with words like he always was. "You're the reason I'm still standing here instead of selling everything and giving up. That clear enough for you?" Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole let go of her shoulders and turned toward the wagon. "Come on, let's get out of this town before I do something I'll regret." They drove in silence for the first half hour. Eleanor stared at the mountains, at the endless sky, at anything but Cole's profile beside her. Her mind kept replaying Mrs. Patterson's words, the way they'd looked at her, like she was pathetic, desperate, something to pity. "Stop thinking about them," Cole said without looking at her. "I'm not. You're a terrible liar. Your face does this thing when you're upset. Your jaw gets tight. My jaw is not tight. It's tight right now." Eleanor forced herself to relax. Failed. "How do you deal with it? The gossip? The people who want you gone?" Cole was quiet for a while. The wagon rattled over rough ground, wheels finding every rut. "I stopped caring what people thought about 10 years ago. Hasn't served me wrong yet." "That easy? Didn't say it was easy. Said I stopped caring. There's a difference. He glanced at her. Those women back there? They're bored. They've got nothing better to do than tear down anyone who threatens their little hierarchy. You threaten them because you're not playing their game. How am I threatening anyone? I'm nobody. You're somebody who chose a hard life over an easy one, who works instead of gossiping, who got her hands dirty burying cattle while they were probably having tea and talking about who wore what to church. That scares them. Eleanor hadn't thought about it that way. They seemed pretty confident to me. Confident people don't need to tear others down to feel better about themselves. Cole shifted the reins. You want my advice? Forget they exist. We've got bigger problems. He was right. They did have bigger problems, like figuring out who poisoned their cattle, like surviving the financial hit, like keeping the ranch running with reduced stock and resources. But somehow Mrs. Patterson's words had gotten under Eleanor's skin in a way the practical problems hadn't. Maybe because the practical problems could be solved with work, with effort. The other thing, the feeling of being second choice, unwanted, that was harder to fight. When they got back to the ranch, Luke was waiting in the yard. His face was pale. What happened? Cole asked, already climbing down from the wagon. Nothing bad. Just, you've got a visitor, been waiting about an hour. Who? Luke hesitated. Says his name is Thomas Whitfield. Claims he's looking for his wife. Eleanor's blood went cold. Cole looked at her. Your sister's husband? I don't know any other Thomas Whitfield. They found him on the porch, sitting in one of the chairs like he owned the place. He stood when he saw them, tall, well-dressed, handsome in a polished way that made him look out of place against the rough wood and worn ranch. Eleanor, he said, smiling, there you are. We've been worried sick. Cole's hand went to Eleanor's elbow, protective. Who the hell are you? Thomas Whitfield. I married Eleanor's sister Rosalie a few weeks ago. His eyes went to Eleanor. She's very upset, you know. She made a mistake running off like that. She wants to make things right. Eleanor found her voice. Where is she? Back in Kansas. Waiting for me to bring you home. Thomas's smile widened. She feels terrible about the confusion, about you coming all this way for nothing, but we can fix this. I've brought enough money to repay Mr. Mercer for his expenses, and we can all put this unfortunate situation behind us. Cole's voice came out dangerous. Put what situation behind us? Well, the mix-up, of course. Rosalie was supposed to come here. She and Mr. Mercer had an arrangement, but then she met me, and we fell in love, and things got complicated. Thomas pulled out an envelope. I'm prepared to compensate you fully for your trouble. Say $50? That should cover the travel expenses and your time. I don't want your money, Cole said. I understand you're upset, but surely you can see that Eleanor doesn't belong here. This is no life for a woman like her. Isolated, dangerous, doing work meant for ranch hands. Thomas turned to Eleanor, his expression sympathetic. Come home. Your family misses you. Rosalie wants to apologize in person. You can find a proper husband, someone in town, someone who can give you the life you deserve. Eleanor stared at him, at his expensive suit and his perfect hair and his assumption that she'd just go along with whatever he decided. No, she said. Thomas blinked. I'm sorry. I said no, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. Eleanor, be reasonable. You can't seriously want to stay in this place. Look at it. Look at you. His nose wrinkled slightly. You're covered in dirt. Your hands are ruined. This isn't the life you were meant for. And what life was I meant for? Being the spinster aunt in your house? Taking care of Rosalie's children? Making myself useful until I die alone and grateful? Thomas's smile slipped. That's exactly what you meant. You and Rosalie want to ease your guilt by bringing me back, by pretending I'm better off there. But I'm not. Eleanor stepped closer to Cole, and his arm came around her waist immediately. I'm married, to Cole, legally. And I'm staying. You can't be serious. You've known this man for what, a month? You married him out of desperation, not love. Maybe I did, Eleanor said, but desperation got me here. And being here taught me I'm stronger than anyone back home ever believed, including me. Thomas looked at Cole. You're really going to keep her? Even knowing she was second choice? Even knowing her sister is the one you actually wanted? Cole's jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled. I don't know what your game is, coming here and insulting my wife, but you've got about 10 seconds to get off my property before I throw you off. I'm trying to help. You're trying to salve your conscience. You married a woman who was promised to someone else, and now you want to fix the mess by taking Eleanor back like she's a returnable item. But she's not an item. She's not second choice, and she's sure as hell not going anywhere with you. Thomas's face flushed. Fine. Stay here in the middle of nowhere with a man who'll never love you properly, but don't come crying back when this life breaks you. He left, got on his fancy horse, and rode away without looking back. Eleanor watched him go, her whole body shaking. You okay? Cole asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe. She turned to look at him. Did you mean what you said? About me not being second choice? Every word. Even though Rosalie was a fantasy. Letters and imagination. You're real. You're here. You work beside me, eat with me, fixed my house and learned to shoot, and didn't run when things got hard. How is that second choice? Eleanor felt tears threatening. She blinked them back hard. I need a minute. She walked to the barn, needing space, needing air. Inside, she leaned against one of the stalls and let herself shake. All of it hitting her at once. The women in town, Thomas showing up, the constant feeling that she wasn't good enough, wasn't wanted, was always going to be the one people settled for. She didn't hear Cole follow her until he spoke. He was wrong, you know, that bastard back there. Eleanor didn't turn around. About what? About me not being able to love you properly. Cole moved closer. She could feel him behind her, not touching, just present. I'm not good at words. I'm not good at romance or pretty speeches, but I know what I've got, and I know I don't want to lose it. Cole, let me finish. His hand touched her shoulder, gentle. When you got off that stagecoach, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd been cheated, stuck with someone I didn't want. Took me about 3 days to realize I'd been given something better than what I asked for. Took me another week to realize I was falling for you. Took me until today to realize I'm already there, completely. And if that's not love, it's close enough that the difference doesn't matter. Eleanor turned. Cole's face was open in a way she'd never seen it. Vulnerable, honest. You love me? She whispered. Think I just said that. Say it again, properly. Cole's ears went red. I love you, Eleanor. There. Happy? Eleanor kissed him. Not a quick peck like at the wedding, a real kiss. The kind that said everything she couldn't find words for. When they broke apart, Cole was smiling, actually smiling. We should get back to work, he said. Got a ranch to save. In a minute. Eleanor pulled him back. I'm not done with you yet. This time when they kissed, it felt like a promise. Like the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. Outside, Luke tactfully found work to do on the far side of the property. That night, after dinner, Eleanor moved her things from the spare room to Cole's room. He helped her carry her few possessions, not saying much, but his eyes kept finding hers. You sure about this? He asked when everything was settled. About which part? Marrying you? Staying? Sharing a room with a man who snores? I don't snore. You absolutely snore. Luke told me. Luke's a liar. Eleanor laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like something she'd been holding back for too long. I'm sure about all of it, even the snoring. Cole pulled her close. Good, because I wasn't planning on letting you leave anyway. They stood like that for a while, just holding each other, listening to the wind outside and the creek in the distance. The ranch was still in trouble. They still had enemies, still had a quarter of their herd gone and bills coming due. But for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Eleanor felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The happiness lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning after the wedding, Eleanor woke to find Cole already gone from bed. Not unusual. He was always up before dawn. But something felt wrong. The air had a weight to it, oppressive and still. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen. No fire in the stove, no coffee brewing. Cole's boots were gone from by the door. Outside, the sky looked strange. Yellow-gray, like old bruises. The wind had died completely, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the nervous lowing of cattle. Eleanor found Luke in the barn, checking equipment with quick, anxious movements. "Where's Cole?" she asked. "Creek." Luke didn't look up. "It's bad, Miss Eleanor. Real bad." She walked to the creek alone, staring at a thin trickle of water barely moving over exposed rocks. What had been a decent stream 2 weeks ago was now nearly dry. The edges were cracked mud and dead fish lay rotting in shallow pools. "How long has it been like this?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Started dropping 3 days ago. Yesterday it was half this. By tomorrow." He didn't finish, didn't need to. "Drought? Worst one in 5 years, according to Hutchins. The whole territory's suffering. Creek up north dried up completely last week. Ranchers are selling off cattle before they starve." Cole's jaw was tight. "We don't have enough water for what's left of our herd." Eleanor looked at the 60 head of cattle scattered across the pasture. They'd survived the poisoning. Now they faced dying of thirst. "What do we do?" "There's a natural spring about 8 miles north. Deeper water comes from the mountain runoff. Should still be flowing." Cole turned to face her. "We move the herd there. Set up a temporary camp. Stay with them until the drought breaks." "How long could that be?" "Weeks, maybe months. Last drought went 4 months before we got rain." "And if the spring dries up too?" Cole's expression went hard. "Then we sell what we can while they're still alive and hope we get enough to survive winter." The next 2 days were chaos. They packed supplies, moved equipment, prepared for an extended stay away from the ranch house. Eleanor filled every container they owned with the last of the creek water. Luke reinforced the temporary corral they'd need at the spring. Cole rode out twice to scout the route, making sure they could actually move 60 head of cattle that distance without losing half of them. On the morning they left, Eleanor stood in the kitchen she'd worked so hard to clean and improve, wondering if she'd ever see it again. If the ranch failed, if they had to sell, this would all be gone. Someone else's home. Someone else's future. "You ready?" Cole asked from the doorway. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. The move took all day. Cattle don't hurry, especially when they're stressed and thirsty. Eleanor rode Bess, helping keep the herd together, while Cole and Luke worked the edges. The sun beat down merciless. Dust hung in the air so thick she could taste it. By the time they reached the spring, Eleanor's entire body ached. Her throat was raw from breathing dust. Her legs felt like they might give out when she dismounted. But the spring was still flowing, clear water bubbling up from underground, forming a small pool before trickling away into the thirsty ground. The cattle smelled it and surged forward, desperate. "Easy!" Cole shouted, trying to keep them from trampling each other in their rush to drink. "Luke, get on the left side. Eleanor, stay back." It took an hour to get the herd under control, to let them drink in shifts without destroying the spring or hurting each other. By the time they finished, full dark had fallen. They made camp 50 yards from the spring. Luke set up a tent for Eleanor and Cole, while Eleanor started a fire and tried to make something resembling dinner from their limited supplies. Beans and hardtack and coffee so strong it could strip rust. "This is awful," Luke said, forcing down a mouthful of beans. "I'm aware," Eleanor said. "I'm doing my best with what we've got." "Wasn't criticizing, just stating facts." Cole ate in silence, staring at the fire. His face was drawn, exhausted. Eleanor could see the weight pressing down on him, the responsibility, the fear, the constant calculation of how much longer they could hold out. That night, lying in the tent with Cole beside her, Eleanor whispered into the darkness, "We're going to be okay. We'll get through this." Cole's hand found hers. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." He was quiet for a long time, then, "I'm glad you're here, even with all this. I'm glad you stayed." Eleanor squeezed his hand. Outside, the cattle moved restlessly, and the wind picked up, carrying no promise of rain. The days blurred together after that. They took turns watching the herd, making sure none wandered off or got taken by predators. Mountain lions prowled at night, drawn by the smell of vulnerable animals. Twice Cole had to fire warning shots to scare them off. The heat was relentless. Eleanor had never experienced anything like it. The sun seemed to press down from above, reflecting off the dry ground, creating waves of heat that made the air shimmer. She wore her bonnet constantly, but her face still burned. Her lips cracked. Her skin felt like paper. Water became everything. They rationed it carefully. Enough for the cattle first, then themselves, then cooking and washing dead last. Eleanor stopped bathing entirely. They all did. Within a week, they were filthy, smelling of sweat and smoke and animals. Luke handled it worst. He was young, unused to real hardship. Eleanor caught him crying once behind the supply wagon, overwhelmed by the heat and the work and the fear that this might never end.
"Hey," she said quietly, sitting beside him. "You're doing fine." "I'm not. I'm useless out here." "You're keeping the cattle alive. That's not useless." Luke wiped his face roughly. "What if the spring dries up? What if we came all this way for nothing? Then we'll figure out the next step. That's all we can do." "How are you not scared?" Eleanor laughed, surprising herself. "Who says I'm not scared? I'm terrified. But being scared doesn't change anything. The work still has to get done." Luke looked at her with something like admiration. "Cole's lucky he got you instead of your sister. She wouldn't have lasted a day out here." "Probably not," Eleanor agreed. "But that doesn't make me better than her, just different." 2 weeks into their stay at the spring, a group of riders appeared on the horizon. Cole saw them first. His hand went to his rifle immediately. "Luke, get over here." Eleanor counted 5 riders. They approached slowly, deliberately, in a way that made her nervous. The leader was a big man, late 40s, with a face weathered by sun and cruelty. He rode like he owned everything he looked at. "Cole Mercer," the man said, stopping his horse 20 feet away. "Heard you were camped out here." "Patterson." Cole's voice was flat. "You're a long way from town." So this was Mr. Patterson, the husband of the woman who'd insulted Eleanor in Clearwater. "Looking at the situation," Patterson said, his eyes sweeping over their camp, the cattle, the spring. "Seems you're barely hanging on. That's a shame." "We're managing fine. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've got 60 head of cattle fighting over one water source. You're living in a tent, and every day this drought continues costs you money you don't have." Patterson smiled. It wasn't friendly. "My offer still stands, $15,000 for the whole property. That's more than generous considering you're about to lose everything anyway." "I already told your wife, I'm not selling. That was before you lost a quarter of your herd, before the drought hit. Times change, Mercer. Smart men adapt." Cole's knuckles went white on the rifle. "Get off my land." "This isn't your land. This is open range. The spring belongs to whoever gets here first." Patterson's eyes went to Eleanor. "Though I have to say I'm impressed. Your wife's tougher than she looks. Most women would have run back to civilization by now." "Leave her out of this. Just making an observation. You married yourself a survivor. Question is whether she can survive what's coming." "Is that a threat?" Patterson's smile widened. "Just a warning. Friendly-like, things happen out here. Accidents, animals die, people get hurt. A smart man would take the money and start over somewhere safer." One of Patterson's men, younger, meaner-looking, laughed. "Yeah. Real shame about those cattle you lost a few weeks back. Terrible accident." Cole raised his rifle in one smooth motion, pointing it directly at Patterson's chest. "Say that again." The camp went dead silent. Patterson held up his hand, still smiling. "Easy now. No need for violence. We're all civilized here." "You poisoned my herd." "That's a serious accusation. You got proof?" "I don't need proof. I know it was you." "Knowing and proving are different things, and without proof," Patterson shrugged, "you're just a failing rancher looking for someone to blame." Eleanor stepped forward before she could think better of it. "Why? Why are you doing this? You've already got land." "Money." "What do you need ours for?" Patterson looked at her like she was a child asking why the sky was blue. "Because it's there. Because I can. Because men like your husband are weak, and weakness deserves to be punished." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Think about my offer, Mercer, before something else unfortunate happens." They rode off, leaving dust and implied threats hanging in the air. Cole lowered the rifle slowly. His hands were shaking with rage. "I should have shot him." "And then what?" Luke asked quietly. "You'd hang. He's too well connected. The law would take his side." "I don't care." "Yes, you do." Eleanor touched Cole's arm. "Because shooting him would mean leaving me alone, and you're not going to do that." Cole looked at her. Some of the rage bled out of his eyes, replaced by fear. "He's not going to stop. You understand that? He'll keep pushing until we break or he takes what he wants. Then we don't break." "Eleanor, we don't break," she repeated firmly.
We keep the cattle alive. We wait out the drought. We survive this. But surviving got harder. The spring's flow decreased daily. What had been a steady stream became a trickle. The cattle were losing weight, ribs showing through their hides. Eleanor could count each bone. Luke got sick first. Fever, chills, vomiting, probably from bad water or spoiled food. Eleanor tried to care for him, but they had no medicine, no doctor, nothing but cold compresses and hope. Cole worked double shifts to make up for Luke being down. Eleanor watched him push himself past exhaustion, past sense, until he was barely standing. "You need to rest," she told him one night. "Can't. Cattle need watching. The cattle need you alive more than they need you awake. I'll rest when the drought breaks." "Cole, I said I'll rest when the drought breaks." He immediately looked sorry for snapping. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "I know." Eleanor put her hand on his face, feeling the fever heat of sun-damaged skin. "But you're no good to anyone if you collapse." He leaned into her touch. "I'm scared, Eleanor. I'm scared we're going to lose everything. The herd, the ranch, all of it." "We might," she said honestly, "but we'll still have each other. That's not enough to live on. It's enough to start over with." Cole pulled her close, and they stood like that in the dark, holding on to each other while the world tried to tear them apart. Luke recovered after 3 days of fever, weak and shaky, but alive. Eleanor made him rest another 2 days before letting him help with the cattle again. And then, on a morning that started like all the others, everything changed. Eleanor woke to the sound of Cole moving around outside the tent. Nothing unusual. But when she emerged, he was staring at the sky with an expression she couldn't read. "What is it?" He pointed west. Eleanor looked and saw clouds, real clouds, dark ones, heavy with the promise of rain. "Don't get excited," Cole said. "Clouds don't always mean rain. I've seen them build up and blow away 100 times. But these clouds didn't blow away. They built through the morning, piling higher, turning darker. The air changed, became thick, electric. The cattle smelled it and grew restless, moving in tight circles. Around noon, Eleanor felt the first drop. She held out her hand, and another drop hit her palm. Then another. "Cole," she whispered. He was already there beside her, his face turned up to the sky. The rain started slowly. Individual drops, tentative, like it wasn't sure it was allowed. Then faster, harder. Within minutes it was pouring, a real rain, the kind that soaked through clothes in seconds. Luke came running out of the tent, whooping like a madman. He spun in circles, arms spread wide, laughing as water streamed down his face. Eleanor started crying. She couldn't help it. Weeks of fear and heat and drought, and now rain. Actual rain falling from the sky like a miracle she'd stopped believing in. Cole grabbed her and kissed her hard, rain running between their faces, turning the dust to mud under their feet. "We made it," he said against her mouth. "We actually made it." The rain lasted 3 days. It filled the spring, revived the creek back at the ranch, soaked into the dry ground until it couldn't hold anymore. The cattle drank and ate fresh grass that sprang up almost overnight, and slowly started putting weight back on. When the rain finally stopped, the world looked different. Green where it had been brown. Alive where it had been dying. They packed up camp and moved the herd back to the ranch. The journey took 2 days, but this time the cattle were stronger, the air was cooler, and hope felt possible again. The ranch house looked the same, but different. Eleanor cleaned it top to bottom, while Cole and Luke repaired damage from the storm. New shingles on the roof, fresh repairs to the barn, making everything solid again. That night, their first night back in their own bed, Eleanor felt something strange, a flutter deep in her belly, so faint she almost missed it. She lay still, hand on her stomach, waiting to see if it happened again. It did. Eleanor's breath caught. She'd suspected for a week or so, but hadn't been sure, had been too scared to hope. Between the drought and the stress and everything else, she'd convinced herself she was imagining things, but she wasn't imagining this. "Cole," she whispered. He was almost asleep. "I need to tell you something." Something in her voice made him wake up fully. He turned to face her in the dark. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think anything's wrong, but I'm—" She took a breath. "I think I'm pregnant." Silence. Complete, total silence. Then Cole sat up so fast he nearly fell out of bed. You're what? Pregnant, maybe. Probably. I'm not completely sure, but all the signs are there, and just now I felt he kissed her, cut her off mid-sentence with a kiss that said everything words couldn't. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor. I'd need to go into town to confirm, but... She put his hand on her stomach. I felt movement, just now. Barely anything, but it was there. Cole's hand stayed where she'd placed it, trembling slightly. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He laughed, actually laughed, a sound of pure joy that Eleanor had never heard from him before. We survived the drought, and we're having a baby. Apparently I'm terrible at timing. Best timing in the world. He pulled her close, careful now, like she might break. Best thing that's ever happened to me. Eleanor felt tears on her face, happy tears this time. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Despite Patterson and the drought and everything else, we're going to make it. We already made it, Cole said. Everything else is just details. The next morning, Eleanor woke to find Cole in the kitchen making breakfast, badly, burning eggs and creating more smoke than heat. What are you doing? She asked, stifling a laugh. You're pregnant. You should rest. I'm pregnant, not dying, and you're ruining those eggs. They're fine. They're carbon. Cole looked at the pan and swore. Fine, you cook, but you're sitting down while you do it. That's not how cooking works. Then I'm helping. Tell me what to do. They made breakfast together, bumping into each other in the small kitchen, and Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. This was her life now. This house, this man, this impossible place that had tried to kill them multiple times. And somehow, against all logic, she'd never been happier. Luke came in for breakfast and immediately noticed something different. The way Cole kept glancing at Eleanor, the way she was smiling despite looking exhausted. What happened? He asked suspiciously. Cole and Eleanor looked at each other. We're having a baby, Eleanor said. Luke dropped his fork. You're... Really? That's... when? Probably winter sometime, January or February, if I'm calculating right. Luke's face split into a huge grin. That's amazing. We need to celebrate. I'll ride into town, get supplies for a proper dinner. We don't have money for that, Cole said, but he was smiling too. I have money, saved up. This is worth it. Luke was already heading for the door. I'll be back by afternoon. Don't do anything dangerous while I'm gone. He left at a run. Eleanor and Cole sat across from each other at the table, the morning sun streaming through the clean windows, and everything felt right in a way it never had before. I love you, Eleanor said. Simple. True. Cole's hand found hers across the table. I love you too, even if you can't cook eggs properly. You're the one who burned them. Details. That afternoon, while Luke was still in town and Cole was working on the fence line, Eleanor walked down to the creek. The water was running strong again, clear and cold, full of life. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the train ride, the stagecoach, stepping off in Cheyenne with no idea what would happen, meeting Cole, who'd looked at her like she was a problem he didn't know how to solve. She thought about the month she'd spent proving herself, the cattle she'd helped save, the drought they'd survived, the enemies they'd made, the love she'd found in the most unexpected place. Her hand went to her stomach where a new life was growing, a child who would be born into this hard, beautiful place, who would learn to ride and shoot and survive, who would carry on after they were gone. Eleanor had come west expecting rejection, had been prepared for failure. Instead, she'd found exactly where she belonged. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Cole was riding toward her, silhouetted against the mountains, and even after everything, her heart still jumped at the sight of him. He dismounted and walked to where she stood by the creek. You okay? He asked. Better than okay. She leaned into him. I was just thinking about how different things could have been. If Rosalie had come like she was supposed to, if you'd sent me away that first day. Don't think about that. That's not what happened. I know, but sometimes I can't help wondering. Cole turned her to face him. You want to know what I think? I think things worked out exactly how they were supposed to.
I think you coming here instead of her was the best thing that ever happened to both of us. And I think our kid is going to grow up knowing their mother is the strongest person in Wyoming."
Eleanor kissed him, long and slow, with the creek running beside them and the mountains standing guard and the future stretching out ahead full of possibility. Whatever came next, whatever hardships, whatever enemies, whatever storms, they'd face it together. And that was enough. Luke came back from town that afternoon with more than supplies. He came back with news that made Cole's face go dark. "Patterson's been talking," Luke said, unloading flour and coffee from the wagon, "telling everyone in Clearwater that you're finished, that it's only a matter of time before you lose the ranch and he buys it for pennies." "Let him talk," Cole said, but his jaw was tight. "There's more. He's been buying up water rights. Every creek and spring within 20 miles. Says when the next drought hits, you'll have nowhere to go." Eleanor felt cold despite the warm afternoon. "Can he do that?" "Legally, yeah." Cole leaned against the wagon, looking tired. "Water rights are complicated out here. First person to claim and register them usually wins. I never bothered because the creek's been reliable for years." "Until it wasn't," Eleanor said quietly. "Until it wasn't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Luke said, "There's one more thing. Someone's been asking questions about you, Eleanor. About where you came from. About your sister." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Who?" "Didn't get a name. Just a man in a nice suit, staying at the hotel, asking about the mail-order bride who married Cole Mercer instead of the woman he was expecting." Cole's hand went to Eleanor's shoulder. "Could be Thomas again. Or it could be Patterson looking for ammunition," Luke said. "Either way, it's not good." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay beside Cole, listening to him breathe, her hand on her still flat stomach. The baby was real now, growing, and she was bringing it into a world where men like Patterson could destroy everything they'd built out of pure greed. "You awake?" Cole whispered. "Yeah." "Thinking about what Luke said?" "Among other things." She turned to face him in the dark. "What if we can't win this? What if Patterson just keeps pushing until we have nothing left?" Cole was quiet for a long time. "Then we start over somewhere else. Montana, maybe, or Oregon." "You'd leave the ranch?" "I'd do anything to keep you and the baby safe. The ranch is just land. Your family." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been the unwanted sister in a Kansas farmhouse. Now she was lying next to a man who'd choose her over everything he'd built. "I don't want to run," she said. "Neither do I." "So what do we do?" Cole pulled her close. "We fight, but smart. Not with guns or fists. We beat him at his own game." The next morning, Cole rode into Clearwater alone. He came back 6 hours later with a lawyer, a thin man named Garrison, who looked too young to be any good at his job. "Mr. Garrison's going to help us file proper claims on our water sources," Cole explained. "Make sure everything's legal and registered before Patterson can challenge it." Garrison nodded, setting up papers on the kitchen table. "I've reviewed the territory records. Your creek originates on your property, which means you have primary rights. But Patterson's filed claims on 3 springs that feed into it upstream. If he blocks those, he can choke off our water supply without touching our land," Cole finished. "Exactly." Garrison pushed his glasses up. "However, there's a provision in territorial law about existing use. Since you've been running cattle on this land for 12 years, you have historical precedent. We can challenge his claims." "How long would that take?" Eleanor asked. "Months, maybe a year, and it'll cost money you probably don't have." Cole rubbed his face. "What's the alternative?" "You could try to buy the water rights from him. Negotiate." "Patterson doesn't want to negotiate. He wants me gone." Garrison looked uncomfortable. "Then you're in a difficult position, Mr. Mercer. I'm sorry." After the lawyer left, Cole sat at the table with his head in his hands. Eleanor had never seen him look so defeated. "We'll figure something out," she said, sitting beside him. "With what? We barely survived the drought. We don't have money for a legal battle. We don't have—" He stopped, looking at her. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't dump this on you. Not with the baby. The baby is exactly why you should tell me everything. We're in this together, remember?" Cole managed a slight smile. "Yeah, together." The answer came from an unexpected source 2 days later. Eleanor was in the garden, fighting with weeds that seemed to grow faster than vegetables, when she heard a wagon approaching. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw two women climbing down. Her stomach clenched. She recognized one of them, Mrs. Patterson, the blonde woman who'd insulted her in town. But the other woman was different, older, dressed simply, with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. "Mrs. Mercer," the older woman said, approaching with her hands held out peacefully. "My name is Sarah Chen. I run a small ranch about 15 miles east of here. May I speak with you?" Eleanor glanced at Mrs. Patterson, confused. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. She looked different than she had in town, smaller, less sure of herself. "I came because Sarah asked me to, and because I owe you an apology. This had to be a trick." Eleanor looked toward the barn where Cole was working. "My husband should hear this too." "Please," Sarah said, "just give us a few minutes." They sat on the porch, an awkward arrangement with Eleanor watching them both warily. Mrs. Patterson kept twisting her hands in her lap. "I was cruel to you in town," Mrs. Patterson said finally. "The things I said about you being second choice, about your sister, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I said it, and I've regretted it since." "Why?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "Why say it if you knew it was wrong?" "Because my husband told me to, because he wanted you to feel small and unwelcome, because—" She stopped, taking a shaky breath. "Because he uses people, manipulates them, and I was too afraid to stand up to him." Sarah reached over and squeezed Mrs. Patterson's hand. "Tell her the rest." Mrs. Patterson looked at Eleanor with eyes that were frightened and exhausted. "My husband is planning something. I don't know all the details, but I heard him talking to his men. They're going to do something to your ranch, something worse than poisoning cattle, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly, but it involves fire, and it's supposed to happen soon, within the week." Eleanor stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. "Cole!" He came running from the barn, rifle in hand, Luke right behind him. He stopped short when he saw the women on the porch. "What's going on?" Eleanor quickly explained. Cole's face went hard as stone as he listened. "Why should I believe you?" he asked Mrs. Patterson. "Why would you betray your husband?" "Because I'm tired of being married to a monster," Mrs. Patterson said, and her voice broke. "Because I've watched him destroy good people for 20 years, and I can't do it anymore. Because if something happens to you or your wife or that baby she's carrying, I'll never forgive myself." Sarah spoke up. "I can vouch for Margaret. She came to me 3 days ago, terrified. She's telling the truth." Cole looked at Eleanor. She could see him thinking, calculating, trying to decide if this was legitimate or an elaborate trap. "What do you want in return?" he asked Mrs. Patterson. "Nothing, just, when this is over, if you could help me leave him. I have nowhere to go. No money of my own. He controls everything." Eleanor saw something shift in Cole's face. Understanding, maybe, or compassion for someone else trapped in an impossible situation. "If you're telling the truth," he said slowly, "then yeah, we'll help you. But if this is a trick, it's not a trick. I swear it's not." Sarah pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I brought something that might help. A petition. 12 ranchers in the territory have signed it, formally protesting Patterson's water rights claims. We've all been hurt by his tactics. Separately, we're weak. But together," she handed it to Cole, "we want to fight back, and we want you to lead it." Cole stared at the paper like it might bite him. "Why me?" "Because you're the one who hasn't given up yet. Because you've survived everything he's thrown at you. Because people respect someone who fights even when they're losing." Eleanor watched her husband's face as he read the names on the petition. Some she recognized from town. Others were strangers. But they represented something bigger than one failing ranch. They represented everyone who was tired of being pushed around. "What about the fire?" Cole asked. "When's it supposed to happen?" "I'm not sure," Mrs. Patterson said. "But soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow." Cole looked at Luke. "Get the rifles, all of them. We're setting up watches." That night, nobody slept. Cole positioned himself in the barn with a clear view of the house. Luke took the north side, watching the pasture.
Eleanor stayed inside with a loaded shotgun Cole had taught her to use, watching through the windows.
The hours crawled past. Midnight came and went. 1 in the morning, 2. Eleanor's eyes burned from staring into the darkness. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound made her jump. At 3:15, Luke's whistle cut through the night, their signal. Eleanor's heart hammered as she crept to the window. She could see movement near the barn. Multiple figures. They were carrying something. Torches, she realized with horror. A gunshot cracked the air. Then another, shouting. More shots. Eleanor ran to the door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the lock. She got it open in time to see Cole tackling someone to the ground. Luke was fighting with another man near the barn. A third figure was running toward the house with a lit torch. Eleanor raised the shotgun. Her hand steadied. "Stop!" she shouted. The man kept coming. She fired into the ground in front of him. The blast was deafening. The man stumbled, dropped the torch, ran. More gunshots, the smell of smoke. Eleanor couldn't see Cole anymore, couldn't see anything but chaos and fire and movement in the dark. Then it was over. As suddenly as it started, it ended. The attackers fled on horses that had been waiting in the trees. Luke stomped out the dropped torch before it could catch. Cole stood in the yard, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. "Everyone okay?" he called. "I'm fine," Luke said. "Eleanor?" "I'm here. I'm okay." They stood in the yard as dawn started breaking, looking at the damage. Not much, thankfully. A scorch mark where the torch had fallen. Some trampled garden, but the house and barn were intact. "We got lucky," Luke said. "Luck had nothing to do with it," Cole said. "We were warned. We were ready." He walked to where one of the attackers had dropped something, a piece of cloth with Patterson's ranch brand on it. Evidence. Actual proof of what they'd tried to do. "This ends now," Cole said quietly. "I'm done playing defense." The next morning, Cole rode into Clearwater with the evidence, the petition, and Garrison the lawyer. He took Luke with him but made Eleanor stay home. "You're pregnant," he said when she protested. "And after last night, I'm not taking chances. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, but humor me anyway." Eleanor watched them ride away, her hand on her stomach, and sent every prayer she knew to whatever forces might be listening. They came back 6 hours later with the sheriff. "Patterson's been arrested," Cole said, dismounting. He looked exhausted but triumphant. "Attempted arson, assault, harassment. The sheriff found 2 of the men from last night. They confessed, said Patterson paid them." Eleanor felt her knees go weak with relief. What happens now? Trial. Probably 6 months from now. But in the meantime, he's sitting in jail, and his water rights claims have been suspended pending investigation. Cole pulled her close. "It's not over yet, but we won." That night, they had an actual celebration. Luke made a feast from their limited supplies. Fried chicken that was only slightly burned, biscuits Eleanor had taught him to make, even a pie from canned peaches. Sarah Chen came by with Margaret Patterson, who looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "I'm staying with Sarah for now," Margaret said quietly to Eleanor. "Just until the trial. After that," she shrugged, "I'll figure it out." "You're stronger than you think," Eleanor said. "So are you. I misjudged you terribly. I'm sorry for that. We all do things we regret. The important part is changing." They ate and talked and laughed, and for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Eleanor felt like she had friends, real friends, people who understood the life she'd chosen. The months that followed weren't easy. Patterson's lawyer tried every trick to delay the trial. The ranch still struggled financially. Eleanor's pregnancy got harder as she got bigger. Her back ached constantly, her feet swelled, and she couldn't stop being sick in the mornings. But they managed. The cattle gained weight, the creek stayed strong. Luke became more confident, taking on responsibilities without being asked. Sarah's petition grew to 20 ranchers, then 30, creating a coalition that Patterson's people couldn't ignore. And Cole? Cole transformed. He'd always been loving in his quiet way, but the pregnancy changed something in him. He became softer, more openly affectionate. He'd put his hand on Eleanor's belly to feel the baby kick and get tears in his eyes. He built a cradle in the barn, working on it for weeks until it was perfect. He even sang sometimes, badly, off-key, but the effort made Eleanor laugh until her sides hurt. You're going to be a good father, she told him one night. How do you know? Because you already are. The way you take care of Luke, the way you protect everyone around you, the way you love completely, even when it scares you. Cole kissed her forehead. I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a reason to keep going beyond just surviving. Neither did I. Turns out we were both wrong about what our lives could be. Patterson's trial happened in January, 2 weeks before Eleanor was due. Cole wanted her to stay home, but she insisted on going. She wanted to see the man who'd tried to destroy them face justice. The courtroom was packed. Every rancher who'd signed the petition was there. The townspeople who'd been intimidated by Patterson for years. Even Hutchins, the minister who'd married them, showed up to watch. The evidence was overwhelming. The two men Patterson had hired testified against him. Margaret Patterson testified about years of threats and manipulation. The piece of cloth with his ranch brand sealed it. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Patterson stood when the verdict was read, his face purple with rage. He looked directly at Cole and Eleanor and said something vicious that the judge immediately silenced. 5 years in territorial prison, the judge declared, and forfeiture of all contested water rights back to their original claimants. It was over. Eleanor felt Cole's hand find hers, squeezing tight. Around them, people were cheering. Sarah was crying. Margaret looked like she'd been released from prison herself. They'd won. Not just the case. Everything. The ranch. The right to exist without fear. The future for their child. Eleanor went into labor 3 days later. It started just after midnight with cramping that woke her from sleep. She lay still for a moment, wondering if it was just the usual discomfort. Then the pain intensified and she knew. Cole, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He woke instantly. What's wrong? The baby's coming. She'd never seen Cole move so fast. He was out of bed, pulling on clothes, shouting for Luke before she could tell him to calm down. We need to get you to town, to the doctor. Cole, there's not time. The contractions are close already. How close? Close enough that we're having this baby at home. The next 8 hours were the hardest of Eleanor's life. Labor wasn't like she'd imagined. It was messier, more painful, more terrifying. She'd read books about childbirth, listened to women talk about it, thought she was prepared. She wasn't, but Cole was there the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her face, telling her she was strong even when she screamed that she couldn't do it anymore. Luke rode to get Sarah, who'd birthed 4 children of her own and knew what to do. Between her calm instructions and Cole's steady presence, Eleanor made it through. The baby came just after dawn. A girl, small but healthy, with a loud cry that filled the house. Eleanor held her daughter for the first time and understood something she'd never quite grasped before. This was what she'd been fighting for, not just the ranch or her marriage or proving herself. This, the future, the continuation of something good in a hard world. She's perfect, Cole whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. His eyes were wet. You're perfect. What should we name her? Eleanor asked. Cole looked at Sarah, who'd saved them both with her experience and calm. Sarah, if that's okay with you. Sarah Chen wiped her eyes. That would be an honor. Little Sarah Mercer entered the world screaming and didn't stop for 3 days. She was colicky, demanding, and slept only in 20-minute increments. Eleanor walked the floors until her feet gave out. Cole took shifts when he could, but he had cattle to manage. Luke tried to help but looked terrified every time the baby cried. This is normal, right? Eleanor asked Sarah on day 4, when she was so exhausted she could barely think. Babies are supposed to cry this much? Some do, some don't. You got a stubborn one, Sarah smiled. Like her mother. Gradually things settled. The baby learned to sleep for longer stretches. Eleanor learned which cries meant hunger versus discomfort versus just general outrage at the world. Cole learned to change diapers without looking like he was defusing a bomb. Spring came to Wyoming, and with it, new beginnings. The coalition of ranchers that had formed to fight Patterson evolved into something more. A cooperative where they shared resources, helped each other with cattle drives, pooled money for better equipment. Cole became one of its leaders, respected for his stubbornness and integrity. Margaret Patterson divorced her husband and married a quiet farmer from the next county over. She seemed happy in a way she'd never been before. Luke started courting a girl from Clearwater, a blacksmith's daughter who could outshoot most men and didn't take any nonsense. And the Mercer Ranch thrived, not because life got easy. It never got easy. There were bad seasons and sick cattle and equipment that broke at the worst possible times, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. One evening in late summer, when baby Sarah was 6 months old, Cole found Eleanor sitting by the creek, the same spot where she'd stood months ago, wondering if she'd made the right choice coming west. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Everything. Nothing. How different my life is from what I expected." She watched the water flow past. "A year ago I was in Kansas, convinced I'd never matter to anyone. Now I'm here with you and Sarah, and I matter so much it scares me sometimes. You've always mattered. You just needed the right place to prove it. Maybe. Or maybe I needed to stop waiting for someone else to see my worth and start seeing it myself." She leaned against him. "Thank you for giving me the chance. Thank you for taking it, for not getting back on that stagecoach, for staying even when things got hard." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. Baby Sarah slept in Eleanor's arms, peaceful for once. "I have something for you," Cole said. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring. Simple gold, delicate, beautiful. "I know we're already married," Cole said, suddenly awkward. "But when we got married the first time, I didn't have anything to give you, and I wanted you to have something that shows you're not second choice. You're the only choice, the best choice, the one I'd make again every single day." Eleanor slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love you," she said, "not because you're perfect, not because life with you is easy, but because you see me, really see me, and you choose me anyway." "That's exactly why I love you," Cole said. They walked back to the house together as twilight settled over the ranch. Inside, Luke was attempting to cook dinner and making a spectacular mess of it. The house smelled like burnt meat and smoke and home. Eleanor looked around at the life she'd built. The clean kitchen where she'd scrubbed away years of neglect. The cradle Cole had made with his scarred hands. The rifle by the door she'd learned to shoot. The land outside that had tested every ounce of her strength. None of it was easy. None of it was perfect. But it was hers. She'd come west expecting nothing and found everything. Found strength she didn't know she had. Found love she didn't know existed. Found a place where being second choice had turned into being exactly right. Years later, when baby Sarah was old enough to ask questions, Eleanor would tell her the story. About how she'd traveled across the country to marry a stranger, about how she'd buried cattle and survived drought and fought off men who wanted to destroy them, about how her father had chosen Eleanor over the woman he thought he wanted, and it had been the best decision either of them ever made. And Sarah would ask, "Were you scared?" And Eleanor would answer honestly, "Every single day, but I did it anyway." That's what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite it. Because that was the truth of their lives, the truth of the frontier, the truth of love itself. It wasn't the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It was the daily choice to stay, to fight, to build something worth keeping even when the world tried to tear it down. The ranch Eleanor and Cole built together lasted for generations. The cooperative they'd helped create changed how ranchers in the territory operated. Their daughter Sarah grew up strong and capable, married a good man, raised her own children on the land her parents had fought to keep. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, those children would find their grandmother Eleanor sitting by the creek, watching the water flow past, and she'd be smiling like she knew a secret. The secret was simple. She'd bet on herself when no one else would. She'd chosen the hard path over the safe one. She'd become the woman she was always capable of being, and she'd never once regretted it. The Wyoming wind blew through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and water and possibility. The mountains stood eternal watch. The house stood strong against the elements. The creek flowed on, feeding the land, sustaining the life they'd built. Eleanor Mercer, once Eleanor Whitmore, once the unwanted sister, once the second choice, sat in the home she'd made and knew with absolute certainty that she'd found exactly where she belonged. Not because it was easy, but because it was real, because she'd earned every single piece of it with blood and sweat and stubborn refusal to give up. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.